welcome to Cozy Reads. In today's video, we invite you to experience a concise and captivating storytelling summary of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Settle in, unwind, and join us as we explore this witty and intricate story. In a quaint English village called Longbourn, the Bennet family lived with an unusual blend of harmony and chaos. The family consisted of 5 daughters, Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Kitty, and Lydia, and their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. Mrs. Bennet, a woman of excitable nerves and a relentless focus on the marriage prospects of her daughters, was ecstatic when news arrived that the wealthy and handsome Mr. Charles Bingley had taken residence at nearby Netherfield Park. A bachelor of good fortune and higher status meant one thing to Mrs. Bennet: a potential husband for one of her girls. Soon the Bennet family had an opportunity to meet Mr. Bingley at a local ball. Mr. Bingley, amiable and warm, immediately took a liking to the eldest Bennet daughter, Jane, who was known throughout the village for her beauty and kindness. The two danced and conversed, their mutual attraction unmistakable to all in attendance. However, it wasn't just Mr. Bingley who caught the eye of the townsfolk. His close friend, Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, a man of even greater wealth but with a much colder demeanour, accompanied him. Darcy's aloofness and refusal to dance with anyone outside his immediate circle made him the subject of much gossip and disapproval, particularly when he slighted Elizabeth Bennet by calling her tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt me. Elizabeth, spirited and quick-witted, was not one to be easily offended, but Darcy's words left a mark. She laughed it off in public, but internally found herself forming a strong prejudice against the proud gentleman. As days turned into weeks, Jane and Mr. Bingley grew closer, frequently finding themselves in each other's company. Elizabeth, meanwhile, continued to encounter Mr. Darcy at various social gatherings. Despite her initial disdain for him, she couldn't help but notice the intensity of his gaze whenever she was near. The village soon welcomed a new guest, Mr. George Wickham, a charming militia officer. Wickham quickly became a favourite among the young women of Meryton, including Lydia, the youngest Bennet's sister, who was flirtatious and carefree. Wickham, noticing Elizabeth's interest, took the opportunity to confide in her, revealing that he and Mr. Darcy had known each other since childhood. He spun a tale of woe, explaining how Darcy had unjustly deprived him of a living that had been promised to him by Darcy's late father. This revelation only served to deepen Elizabeth's dislike of Darcy, reinforcing her belief that he was a man of bad character. As autumn faded into winter, Jane received an invitation to Netherfield, where she fell ill and was confined to bed for several days. Elizabeth, worried for her sister, trekked through muddy fields to visit her, arriving at Netherfield with a decidedly unladylike appearance. Darcy, who was staying at Netherfield, found himself admiring Elizabeth's playful determination and natural beauty, despite himself. The more time they spent together, the more he became captivated by her intelligence and wit, though Elizabeth remained oblivious to his growing admiration. Despite Darcy's silent admiration, his actions soon led to greater misunderstandings. After Jane's recovery and return home, Bingley abruptly left Netherfield and returned to London without any explanation, leaving Jane heartbroken. Elizabeth suspected Darcy's hand in this sudden departure and was further convinced of his meddling when she discovered a letter revealing Darcy's advice to Bingley against pursuing Jane, citing her family's lower status and lack of fortune. Spring brought Elizabeth a trip to the nearby estate of Rosings Park, where she visited her friend Charlotte, now married to the pompous and obsequious Mr. Collins, a distant cousin of the Bennets. Rosings was the grand home of Lady Catherine de Bourgh, Darcy's wealthy and domineering aunt. During her stay, Elizabeth was shocked when Darcy appeared unexpectedly. Darcy, after much internal struggle, could no longer suppress his feelings. Despite their differences in social standing and his misgivings about her family, he declared his love for her and proposed marriage in a rather abrupt manner, assuming she would accept. To Darcy's astonishment, Elizabeth refused him outright. She accused him of ruining Jane's happiness and condemning Wickham to a life of poverty. Darcy, visibly shaken, listened to her grievances, but said nothing in his defence. He left, his pride wounded, but the following morning he handed Elizabeth a letter. The letter detailed his reasons for advising Bingley to distance himself from Jane, as well as the true story of Wickham's deceit and attempted elopement with Darcy's younger sister, Georgiana. Elizabeth, though initially resistant to believe Darcy's words, gradually realised she might have misjudged him. Returning to Longbourn, Elizabeth's feelings toward Darcy grew more conflicted. She couldn't ignore the evidence presented in his letter, but still harboured resentment for his initial behaviour. However, her perception of him changed drastically during a trip to the north with her aunt and uncle, the Gardeners. They visited Pemberley, Darcy's magnificent estate, believing him to be away. There, Elizabeth was struck by the beauty and elegance of his home and the glowing reports of his kindness from his staff. To her surprise, Darcy arrived unexpectedly during their visit. Instead of expressing anger or discomfort at their intrusion, he was gracious and hospitable, treating Elizabeth and her relatives with the utmost respect and care. Elizabeth was further astonished when Darcy introduced her to his sister Georgiana, who was shy and sweet, clearly adoring her brother. This side of Darcy was entirely new to Elizabeth. He was kind, considerate, and far from the proud man she had once thought him to be. Just as Elizabeth was beginning to understand her feelings for Darcy, disaster struck her family. Lydia had run off with Mr. Wickham, throwing the Bennet household into chaos. Lydia's reckless behaviour threatened to bring disgrace upon the entire family, and Elizabeth was devastated. She knew such a scandal could ruin her sister's chances of good marriages and bring shame to their name. When Darcy learned of Lydia's elopement, he was moved to action. Without Elizabeth's knowledge, he sought out Wickham, paid off his debts, and arranged for him to marry Lydia, thus saving the Bennet family from ruin. Darcy's intervention was not done for recognition, but out of love for Elizabeth, proving the depth of his feelings and the sincerity of his character. Elizabeth, overwhelmed by Darcy's generosity and selflessness, realised just how much she had come to care for him. Her initial prejudices had blinded her to the man he truly was, and she now saw him in a new light. When she returned home, she learned the truth of Darcy's actions from Lydia, who accidentally let it slip, and from Mrs. Gardiner, who confirmed the details. Elizabeth was deeply moved, recognising that Darcy's actions were motivated by his love for her. Soon after, Mr. Bingley returned to Netherfield and proposed to Jane, who accepted with joy. Their engagement brought happiness to the Bennet household, but Elizabeth remained unsure of her future with Darcy. She did not know if his feelings had changed after her earlier rejection, or if he still saw her in the same light. Her uncertainty was put to rest when Darcy visited Longbourn again, this time with Bingley. During a private walk, Darcy confessed that his feelings for Elizabeth had not wavered, and asked her once more if she would be his wife. Elizabeth, with her heart full, accepted his proposal. She realised that she loved him deeply, admiring his integrity, generosity, and the changes he had made out of love for her. As they prepared for their new life together, Elizabeth and Darcy reflected on the misunderstandings and obstacles they had overcome. Their love, which had been tested by pride and prejudice, emerged stronger and more genuine. They married and moved to Pemberley, where they lived happily, welcoming their friends and family with warmth and joy. In the end, Pride and Prejudice is not just a story of two people falling in love, but a journey of growth, self-reflection and understanding. Elizabeth and Darcy's story reminds us that true love often requires us to look beyond first impressions and to find the courage to confront our flaws and change for the better. Thank you for joining us for this narrated summary of a classic tale. We hope it brought you a moment of relaxation and that you enjoyed this journey through the realms of timeless literature. If today's summary inspired you and you wish to explore the full story, please find the link to the complete book in the comments below. Please consider subscribing for more calming literary adventures. Until next time, keep the stories alive and the pages turning.